Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to continue with the Book of Enoch and the Luminaries, which is, I think we're still on that subject. Chapter 73, verse 1. I'll begin with the verse, and it says, "Then I saw another process and a regulation for her, how by means of this law the cycle of its months are completed. And all these Uriel showed me, the envoy of the set-apart one who directed all of those." As I already mentioned in the previous chapter, Uriel means my light is the mighty one, or the light of the mighty one. And that is the reason why he is the one who directs all of them, meaning the luminaries. He is in control or has all knowledge of the luminaries. So when it was time to know about the luminaries, Uriel was sent to Hanoch to explain all things regarding the lights. So it is talking about the moon, and he says, "Then I saw another process and a regulation for her, how by means of this law the cycle of its months are completed. And all this Uriel showed me, the envoy of the set-apart one who directed all of those. I wrote down their stations just as he showed them to me. Then I saw another process and a regulation for her, how by means of this law the cycle of its months are completed. And all this Uriel showed me, the envoy of the set-apart one who directed all of those. I wrote down their stations just as he showed them to me. I wrote down their stations just as he showed them to me. And I drew its moons just as they occur, and the aspect of their light until 15 days are completed. As we know, when the moon starts to grow in light, it takes 15 days for it to be full. So full moon on the 15th of the month of the moon. In fact, obviously in English, month and moon are clearly connected. By each of its half seventh portions, it fills all its light to the east, and by each half seventh part, it fills its darkness towards the west. So you see how it grows for 15 days to the east till the 15th when it is full moon, and then its light starts to go down, filling itself with darkness to the well, in this case to the west, but with darkness. So by each of its half seventh portions, it fills all its light to the east, and by each half seventh part, it fills its darkness towards the west. So in 7 parts. That is why it can happen on the 15th or the 14th, because the lunar month lasts 28 to 30 days. So if it is 30 days, then it's on the 15th. But if that month will last 29 or 28, it might happen on the 14th. Then it says, on certain months, it changes its settings. And on certain months, it follows its own path. So right there, we see that the moon is not very trustworthy when it comes to following it, because sometimes it changes its settings, and certain months it follows its own path. So that is kind of like saying it does what it wants. And that is also one of the reasons why it is in darkness, during the nighttime, and it represents humanity, the people of Yahweh, the congregation, in the sense that is, it gets filled with light, but because of the apostasy, darkness entered it. Also, the fact that it would be the mother of the stars, and the stars are what Yahweh tells us that we will become, that we will be like the stars of heaven in Daniel 12. So During well, on certain months, it changes its settings, and on certain months, it follows its own path. So that's why Israel, as the moon, on certain times of history, it followed its own path, not the one that Yahweh prescribed for it. And that's why they failed in exile and sin and all of that. So on certain months, it changes its settings, and on certain months, it follows its own path. During 2 months, the moon sets with the luminary orb through the 2 gates which are in the middle. So remember last week we saw how when the cycle restarts, the moon and the sun rise together. They come up together and set together. So when that cycle begins, then this cycle that it is mentioned here happens. So when it rises with the sun, in this case, as it says here, during 2 months, the moon sets with the luminary orb. So during that cycle, when it's restarted, during that year, there will be 2 months in which the moon will set with the sun through the 2 gates which are in the middle. So third and fourth. The year begins during the time in which the sun is in the 4th gate. So that means that that is one of the months when it rises with it and sets with it. In the 3rd and the 4th gate, right there. In the 3rd and the 4th gate. It emerges for 7 days and makes its circuit. And again, it returns to the gate, hence the luminary orb emerges. And when the luminary orb comes out through the 6th gate, it comes, meaning the moon, it comes out for 7 days until it emerges from the 5th gate. And again, it returns during 7 days through the 4th gate and completing all its light. It wanes and enters through the 1st gate in 8 days. So we see how the moon, unlike the sun, for instance, the sun goes a whole month on going through one gate. Then it changes gates for another month, and then another month goes to a different gate. So throughout the year is in each of the gates twice, because there are 6 gates. When it comes to the moon, we see how since it goes faster, its cycle, it lasts less than that of the sun, like we were seeing last week. Then it changes gates in a matter of days, like we're seeing here. And again, it returns during 7 days through the 4th gate, and completing all its light, it wanes and enters through the 1st gate in 8 days. And it returns during 7 days to the 4th gate, from which the luminary orb goes forth. Thus have I seen their stations, how the moon emerges and the luminary orb sets during those days. If we add up 5 years, the luminary orb has an excess of 30 days. If we add up 5 years, the luminary orb, the sun, has an excess of 30 days. And all of days, which these 5-year periods add up to upon completion, are 364 days. So here we have another instance in which we see that the years, the true calendar has 364 days. It is the second time mentioned by Hanoch as the number for the year, 364 days. And as we just read, after 5 years, the sun has an excess of 30 days in comparison to the moon, because the moon is late. Here it says, if 5 years are combined, the sun gains 50 extra days. You see how different it is because the other one said 30, this one says 50. And we'll see why this other one kind of has more sense. Well, in fact, it is right here. The gain of the sun and of the stars turns out to be 10 days in 3 years, 10 days every year out up to 30 days, and the moon falls behind the sun and the stars for 30 days. So in 3 years, the moon falls behind 30 days. So that means 10 days per year. That's why the lunar calendar lasts 354, 355 days. So if 5 years are combined, the sun gains 50 extra days. Consequently, one of those 5 years gains. And when it is completed, it turns out to be 364 days. Sadly, there's no comment on that verse on the other translation. Let me go to the other one again and see this other verse. So if we add up 5 years, the luminary orb has an excess of 30 days, and all of the days which these 5 year periods add up to upon completion are 364 days. So in a way, it would be a saying that after the 5 years of the moon, it would fulfill an entire year of the sun because of those days that are being that the moon will be late. But then this verse says the excess of the luminary orb and stars comes to be 6 days in 5 years. At 6 days per year equals 30 days. So that the moon has 30 days less than the luminary orb and the stars. So they switched this one also. Come to be 6 days in 5 years. So this one says 5 years, the other one said 3 years, and that's why I'm guessing that this translation is trying to fix an issue with their interpretation, and it would have changed the 50 for 30 and here the 3 for 5. The other possibility, of course, would be that the other translation was the one who switched it. So let me see it again. So yeah, I guess we have that issue with these translations. If you guys have a different translation than these two, it would be nice if you could check these verses to see a third opinion, pretty much a third possibility. And I might have, I have other, let me see, another Enoch, and even one in Spanish, perhaps. So here, reading from Spanish one, says, if we add up 5 years, the sun has an excess of 30 days. So that is like the first one, the first translation, 5 and 30 days. Now, in this translation, one thing is understood a bit better. It says, so if we add up the 5 years, then the sun has an excess of 30 days. And all the days that add up one of those 5 years when completed is 364 days. So right there is saying the years that it is referring to are years of 364 days, not years of 355, which are those of the lunar calendar. So when we take into account the true calendar, 364 days, as Hanoch said it in previous chapters, then when we take 5 years, there's an excess of 30 days. And that is one of the reasons also why in the lunar cycle and the lunar calendar, the Jewish calendar, they have to add a 13th month. So You know, in the Gregorian calendar, they add every 4 years, they add 1 day, but it is a solar calendar. And the sun takes 365.24 days to complete its cycle. The moon, 255, 254. So because of the sun and the Gregorian calendar, every 4 years, they add 1 day to take into account that 0.24 or 0.25 that is beyond the 365 days. But in the lunar calendar, because of its cycle and the fact that there are 30 days, in this case, in the time of Hanoch, in 5 years, 30 days, the difference between the lunar and the solar calendar, then what they do is they add a month, a whole month, which they call the second Adar, since Adar is what they call the 12th month. So they call it the second 12th month. And they do that because we don't see in the scriptures ever a 13th month, ever. So they call it the second Adar so that they can claim that when it says Adar in the scripture, it may be the first or the second. It may be that month that they added to their calendar, but that is something that we never find in scripture, and Yahweh would be clear about it. In fact, Hanoch could have said it here, that we would have to add a month if we were following a lunar calendar, but here is talking about the contrast between the cycle of the moon and the cycle of the month. So with this verse, even though it's taken, and it does make more sense now that I see this verse and mention the way the Jewish calendar has a whole month when they need to add those 30 days, they add a whole month. So then he was saying, and the excess of the sun and the stars, which is 6 days in 5 years. So 6 days per year are 30 days. And the moon is missing 30 days with respect to the sun and the stars. So 6 days per year, every 5 years, we have 30 days. Now, like I have said, Yahweh made a couple what seem to be adjustments to the luminaries in order to adjust the time of this reality. When Yahushua stopped the sun and the moon for a whole day, the stars would have continued because it doesn't mention anything about the stars. And then when the king asked Yeshayahu Isaiah to tell Yahweh to make the sun go back 10 degrees. So when the sun went back, it is very possible that the moon continued just like the stars. So that would have changed the clock pretty much. And that is two possible ways in which Yahweh could have shortened the times at the end, like we see in the letter of Peter. I say all of that because the cycle of the moon seems to have changed a bit, in the sense that, well, we could say that it changed a bit because it's not always exactly like this that we're reading here, or we could say that Hanoch only mentioned one of the couple ways in which it happens. And what I mean, the lunar cycle, in which they add that whole month. So let me go and see if I can find real quick the way they add the month so that you can see it clearly. So I'll share this real quick just to read a little bit from it. So look at this. A leap year in the Jewish calendar has 13 months. But I repeat, they don't call it the 13th month because it never appears in scripture. So they just call it the second 12th month, the second Adar, and occurs 7 times in a 19-year cycle. So in 19 years, they add 7 months. 7 months in 19 years. So 210 days. 210 days in 19 years is what they have to add. Oh, something else I wanted to say. Oh yeah. So the fact that it occurs 7 times in 19-year cycle makes it a bit different than what we just read in Hanoch, because in Hanoch it would mean that pretty much every 5 years you would add 30 days. Every 5 years you would add 30 days, and then in 20 years you would have done it only 4 times. Yet they say here that they do it 7 times in 19 years. So 3 times more in a year less. So that's why I was saying that it seems to have either changed a bit, or Hanoch only mentioned one cycle that happens in 5 years. Let's say, for instance, when the cycle begins, the first time that they added the 30 days would be in 5 years, but then in 3 or 4, and then 5, and then 3 again, something like that. So that's how it gets to 7 in 19 years. So Hanoch could have mentioned just one part of the 19-year cycle, just one of those, and not the others, and that's why it seems to be a bit different. Or the other possibility is that since Yahweh made those changes with the luminaries throughout history after Hanoch, that is why there seems to be a bit of a difference, or bigger, or amount of time, pretty much. So let me see. For instance, here, a leap year occurs 7 times in the 19 Metonic cycle, namely in years. Here we go: 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 19 of the cycle. So since they already know the cycle and they've known it for a long time, in fact, Hillel, not Satan, a rabbi of the Jewish people, Hillel, he was the one who calculated the lunar calendar so that they would follow the same calendar all the time, and that the feast wouldn't fall in the same days in which they fell when Mashiach came and fulfilled them. So they made a calendar kind of going against Mashiach, while at the same time trying to, well, something that was not done before with the lunar calendar was to tell the months and the days before there were witnesses who would say when the new moon would come out. So Hillel pretty much made a calendar so that wouldn't be needed. But it was after the time of Mashiach, so that is also important. So look how it says here, the year 3 in the cycle of the 19 years of the moon. So just by saying the year 3, we see something that we're about to see here in Hanoch, because if you see here the year 3, that means that in 3 years there were 30 days, because the moon, like I have said many times, and we'll see it in Hanoch, stays or is late for 10 days when it comes to the solar calendar or the solar cycle. So in 3 years, we have 10. Each year, we have 30 days right there. Then 3 more years, we have the 6th year in which they added 30 days. Then only 2 years, and they add already a month. But then they go back to 3 years, then 3 years, then 3 years, and then 2 again. So 332, 3332. So this means that a leap month is every 2 to 3 years. There are some other details here. I don't think they're like, well, I'll leave it here just in case there's anything else we want to check from here. But all I wanted to show was that Metonic cycle of 19 years and how pretty much there are 10, even a bit more, like 10 could be 11, depending on the moon. That's why in 2 occasions during the 19 years, it happens after 2 years that they add a whole month. So it would be 15 days pretty much per year. So I'm going to go to Hanok. So the excess of the luminary orb and stars comes to be 6 days in 5 years at 6 days per year equals 30 days. Yeah, what makes me still wonder is why this other translation has those numbers different. And I had even opened another book of Hanok that I had here, but I don't see it anymore. So let me open it again. So I guess it will be 74 here, 10 and 11. I'll share this version. It says, and if 5 years are added together, the sun has an excess of 30 days. For each year of the 5 years, there are 364 days. For each year of the 5 years, there are 364 days. I repeat that a lot, but I think it's important because a lot of people have the idea still that the calendar should be lunar. But we see here that each year lasts 364, so there's no way it can be lunar. For the moon is only 355 days. Then, and the excess of the sun and the stars comes to 6 days in 5 years with 6 days each. They have an excess of 30 days. And the moon falls behind the sun and the stars by 30 days. All right, so that is a way of showing how or why the Jewish people have to add a whole month since they follow the moon to keep the calendar. So both the Spanish one and this other translation seem to agree with this one, so I'll continue. It says, so that the moon has 30 days less than the luminary orb and the stars. The luminary orb and the stars carry on the entire year precisely. This is also very important. This verse is huge, so keep all this in mind. The luminary orb, known as the sun, and the stars carry on the entire year precisely. So it doesn't say the moon carries the year. It says the sun and the stars. I already mentioned how the stars would have continued when Yahushua stopped the sun, known as Joshua, and the moon, and when Yeshayahu made the sun go back 10 degrees. So with only that, the stars could have gotten in a, well, not a different path, but a different time than the sun. So because the sun went back while the stars continued. So that could make a difference in what this verse is telling us regarding the stars in the luminary orb. And in fact, we will read in the book of Hanoch still later on, I don't know if tonight, that the stars would eventually not come in their time. So that means that eventually the stars would not be trustworthy. And I say that because besides the many lunar calendars that there are around, there is another calendar that some people, well, I don't know if it was one guy or several that made it. They claim it is based on Hanoch, and they use several verses of Hanoch, but they interpret it out of context. And they made the calendar to be only about the stars. So, like I have said, the sun is the main luminary. Yahweh said it in Genesis. Then the moon is pretty much its wife. So male and female, head and body. And then the stars are their children. So to claim that the calendar must be followed according to the stars only would mean, or would be like saying that a family must be led by the children, which makes no sense. It is the head, the sun. So in the same token, when it comes to the calendar, to counting time, the sun is the main one. Then we look at the other luminaries for signs, and also to see the other connections that we see in the book of Hanoch regarding, for instance, when the sun and the moon come up together to restart the cycle, stuff like that. The fact that the sun lasts a whole month in one of the houses of the 12 constellations and stuff like that. But I repeat, we cannot only follow the stars, because the stars, as Hanoch will say later, eventually would not come in time. So we could not wait for the stars in order to start the calendar. Since they are late, we must focus on the sun. And as Hanoch said it, the day when the day and night are equal in time, 12 hours and 12 hours, which is the spring equinox. That is the last day of the year. And that is when the sun is right in the middle, on top, obviously, of the earth, right in the middle of the earth. So the luminary orb and the stars carry on the entire year precisely, such that they do not advance nor move back their positions, not even a single day, not even a single day, for all eternity. And they complete their years with correct precision in 364 days. So once again, the luminary orb and the stars carry on the entire year precisely. So what is the entire year precisely? 364 days. That is what the year is, what the year lasts, not 355. And I know I say it a lot, but there are way more people who believe in a lunar calendar and claim to be the calendar of the scriptures when they don't take into account Hanoch, like this part, or the scriptures, because we see it in scriptures as well. Not only that, even the person who made this translation, and I guess that was the person who makes this translation, I believe, still has a lunar calendar, which I find amazing, because with his own translation, I can see that it is solar. So the luminary orb and the stars carry on the entire year precisely, such that they do not advance nor move back their position, not even a single day, for all eternity. They complete their years with correct precision in 364 days. What's interesting is that now we know that the cycle of the sun lasts 365.24. So why it's saying here that the luminary orb always does 364? Once again, there are two possibilities. One, that when Yahushua stopped the sun for a whole day, what that did was stretch the year 24 hours. For that year, the sun and the moon stopped, but a whole day happened, like 24 hours, and then they continued. So to say, no way, next year, the sun and the moon would have to complete that day, but moving. So that would have stretched, in a way, the year one day. And then when the sun was taken back 10 degrees, that could have added the 24, the 0.24 of the cycle of the sun, which is 365.24 days. So 1 day and 24 extra, that could be from stopping the sun one whole day. We have one there, and then the sun going back 10 degrees. less than a day, which in this case would be pretty much a quarter of day. So another possibility there, because as we know, even though Hanoch is the one who tells us that the year is 364, 364, 364, we see that Hanoch lived 365 days and then he was taken by Elohim. So that could mean that from the beginning, the sun was 365, but here we are being told that the calendar must happen in a way that it lasts 364 instead of 365, or the year in which Yahweh took Hanoch from the earth, 365, would have been as a prophecy of how the year would, or the cycle of the sun, not the year, because the calendar remains 264, but the cycle of the sun would become 265. And that is why Hanoch was taken when he was 265 years old, because Hanoch represents the son of righteousness. So since he represents the son of righteousness, he was taken when he was 265 to represent that the sun has a cycle of 265 days. However, the calendar must be 364, and that is where we must adjust it in order to have the calendar as the Almighty told us through Hanoch and through scriptures. Another thing which is connected to one of these two possible ways in which this happened, going from 364 to 365.24, is that we see in the book of Job, and I guess we could go and read it right now. Let me go find it. So we have Job 3, and it says, remember that Job is believed to be the first book to have been written from scriptures. So it would have been written before the Torah itself. Some believe it was written also by Moshe. Obviously, others would believe by Job. It says, Job chapter 3, verse 1, after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Cursed the day of his birth. So before the entire scripture was given, in which a calendar of 364 days is given, there was a man who cursed a day from the calendar. Then it says, and Job spoke and said, let the day perish on which I was born, and the night it was said, a male child has been conceived. A male child. In Hebrew, this is verse 3, it says, the day, let's see, that it was said, Amar, which is connected to the name Omar, Hora Gaber. Here would be a man. This Geber, but since it's the last word, they change a little bit the pronunciation. And that Gaber of Geber is connected with Gibor, and is connected with the son of man, the male child who will rule the nations with a rod of iron. Yahweh coming as a Gibor, and who is also represented by Job for many reasons. So, let the day perish on which I was born, and the night it was said, a male child has been conceived. So he is taken in a way, spiritually, through this curse, a day and a night, so 24 hours from the calendar, or from the cycle of the sun, which would have been 365, but because of the curse of Job, it became 264. So let the day perish on which I was born, and the night it was said, a male child has been conceived. Also, look how he mentions the day and then the night. While in Judaism, they follow first the night and then the day, meaning they begin the day during the afternoon. Then it says, let that day be darkness. Let that day be darkness. Interestingly enough, when Joshua stopped the sun and the moon, the sun was shining on them when they were fighting against their enemy and were able to defeat them. But during that whole day, on the other side of the world, there was utter darkness. And there are even a bunch of stories. There are like, I think there are over 20 stories from both sides of the earth that speak about a certain day in which for 24 hours the sun didn't come up, while on the other side there, because there are like, let's say 9 from one side, like 11 from the other one. And they say that the sun never went down for a whole day. I wouldn't be surprised if those who were in America, for instance, most likely sacrificed a lot, perhaps even people, sadly, to their gods, hoping that the sun would come up when they saw that it wasn't coming up. So my point is that for a whole day on this side of the earth, the day was complete darkness. And like I said, it is possible that when Joshua stopped the sun and the moon, Yahweh was adjusting the clock so that he could shorten the times, adding one day to each year from then on, so that the sun would run out of days in a shorter time before reaching the year 6000. In fact, doing that, it would take pretty much one day. I mean, each millennium would represent 1 year. So it would take 6 years at the end of the 6,000 years. So that pretty much would take the end 6 years prior, meaning, well, I will have to talk about a bunch of more dates that we see in the book of Revelation. But my point is that if the end was the year 6000, then by adding 1 day to each year, that would take it back 6 years, and that would be the year 5994. And that's a way in which Yahweh could have shortened the times. So we have here that he said, curse the day and let that day be darkness. When Joshua stopped the sun and the moon, there was a day of darkness. So it was as if what Job spoke was fulfilled. So as if Job prophesied, and it was fulfilled through Yahushua ben Nun, in which when he stopped the sun and the moon, there was a day of darkness on the other side of the world. So that day of darkness would represent the day taken from the calendar to make it 364, because it was cursed by Job. So I think those two possibilities actually connect, is if we see him as spiritual, seeing this as a prophecy being fulfilled with Yahushua when he stopped the sun and the moon, taking a whole day of darkness on the other side of the earth. So let that day be darkness. Let not Eloah, which is similar to Elohim, let not Eloah from above seek for it, nor let light shine upon it. Nor let light shine upon it. So that was fulfilled. There was 1 day like that. And some believe it was the third day of the 4th month. At least that's what is said in Jewish tradition. And it is possible for several reasons, but I'm not going to say that it is for sure on that day when Joshua did that, I mean. So let that day be darkness. Let not Eloah from above seek for it, nor let light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death buy it back. Let a cloud dwell on it. Let all the blackness, let all that blackens the day frighten it. That night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. This is key. That night, let darkness seize it. So imagine if Joshua was recorded not only in scriptures, but only the book of Yashar saying to the sun, stop, and also to the moon. So that means he was looking at the sun and the moon like we can also do sometimes during the day. We can see the sun and the moon. So both were above them at that time of war. So that means that on the other side of the world, there was obviously no sun, but also no moon. So the fact that it says that night let darkness cease it means that it was darker than every other night. Just like, you know, when there's full moon, it's not that dark. But when there's a new moon or the day before that, it is darker. Imagine no moon at all. So that night let darkness cease it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. So we know that the sun has a cycle of 365, yet Job prayed that one whole day would be taken from the calendar. So that is a possible reason why Yahweh gave us a 364 calendar. Let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. So it cannot be included even in the months. And I say that because there's a person who talks about this subject, this chapter, but what he says pretty much that, well, he follows the calendar of 364, but then at the end he adds the day of Job. So at the end he has a 365 year calendar. And I'm sure after 4 years he has to add one day. So at the end he kind of has, well, something very similar to the Gregorian calendar. But Hanoch, the scripture tells us 364 over and over again. And then we have here that it says in scriptures, let it not come into the number of the months. So we know, as we read in Hanoch, that the months of the year are 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, meaning 364, because that day of Job's birth cannot be added. And it would be represented by the day in which the year was stretched when Joshua stopped the sun and the moon for a whole day. And therefore, on the other side of the world, there was utter darkness. So let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Look, let that night be silent. Let no singing come into it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to stir up Leviathan. Let the stars of its twilight be dark. Let it wait for light, but have none. And let it not see the eyelashes of the dawn. For it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die from the womb, come forth from the belly and expire? All of this that he's saying, obviously, well, you guys know the book of Job, hopefully. If not, you can read it. It's very great. And we see how, in the spiritual sense, he represents the last. In a way, it connects with the first, obviously, because Yahushua the first didn't do anything to go through the suffering that he went through. So that part, we see it in the book of Job, and that is the only part that connects with Mashiach. Because Job was king of Bozrah, that connects with the last, according to Isaiah 63. Job was believed to be a Gentile, that connects with the last, who comes as a thief in the night. Job was, well, he was called male child here, like the male child or the son of man. And he seems to have wanted death a lot, not even wanting to come to this world. And like I was explaining in the previous study, that is something that may happen with the last, since the last is a lot like Yaakov. And as we know, Yitzhak and Yaakov had different types of lives. Yitzhak had a calm life, but then he was taken to be sacrificed. That was a day of testing. Then we have Yaakov, who went through a lot of suffering, but mainly spiritually or mentally, because of what he thought or he interpreted from the events that occurred to him. So the last would go through certain pain that would cause him to say things like this, which remember also, see, we already did the study last Shabbat of when Moshe told Yahweh, kill me. So we see Moshe telling Yahweh to kill him. We see Yonah, and Yahushua said, the evil generation asks for a sign, but they will not receive a sign, but only the sign of Yonah. And that fits him, of course, but as we know, Mashiach did a lot of signs. So there are a couple ways of interpreting that verse, but just to be fast, we could say that he was mainly referring to the second coming because he did a lot of works, a lot of signs. In fact, when they would talk to him, not believing in his words, he would say, if you don't believe in my words, believe in the signs, believe in the works that I do. Now, since the Pharisees had no spiritual sight, they couldn't see the signs, even if they were done in front of them because of their ego, pride, and all of that. So in a way, they weren't able to see the signs. They were only able to know when he was resurrected. So that was a way in which he was fulfilled with them, but only spiritually, because physically he did do a lot of signs. But in the other sense of the prophecy, he's talking about the Son of Man coming like Yonah, being rejected. People won't see any signs from him directly because they are unbelievers. But then he will resurrect 3.5 years later, as we see in Revelation 11. So also Eliyahu asked to be killed or to die. So we know Moshe and Eliyahu as the main representation of the two witnesses. And as I was saying, the witness like Moshe is like Job, is like Jacob, is like Yonah. And we see them thinking in certain times in their lives wanting to die. So why did I not die from the womb, come forth from the belly and expire? Why were there knees to receive me, or breasts for me to suck? For now I would have been lying in peace. I would have slept. Then I would have been at rest. So it continues, but the whole point of the chapter is that a whole day was taken from the calendar. At least a whole day was cursed. And that could be the day that creates a bit of confusion for many when it comes to the fact that the sun has 365 while the calendar is 364. So either because of the curse of Job, it was taken out of the calendar, or because of the curse of Job as a prophecy, there was an extra day during the time of Joshua in which there was utter darkness during the whole day on one side of the world to kind of fulfill that. So Noah assented here. Thus I beheld their stations according to the fixed order of the months, the sun rises and sets. At those times there is an excess of 30 days belonging to the sun in 5 years. All the days belonging to each year of the 5 years, when completed, amount to 364 days, and to the sun and stars belong 6 days, 6 days in each of the 5 years. 30 days belonging to them, so that the moon has 30 days less than the sun and stars. Thank you, brother. So, continuing with Hanok. The luminary orb and the stars carry on the entire year precisely such that they do not advance nor move back their positions, not even a single day. This is interesting also, nor move back. But when the time of Hiskiyahu came, he was asking for a sign, and Yahweh gave him a sign of moving the sun back 10 degrees. So he did it for men. He did it, for humanity. He did it for the king of Yahudah, who, by the way, and I know I say this a lot, it seems like I just say it, but if we look at the scriptures and take into account every verse, you'll see why. Hiskiyahu is also a representation of the last. Chizkiyahu is the one who destroyed the serpent made by Moshe in the desert, because the Israelites were worshiping it as an idol, and that was not the point of it. Chizkiyahu destroyed it, and then the Assyrian king was saying, and not only him, I'm sure a lot of Israelites were saying that Chizkiyahu destroyed the gods of Israel, as they would say in the world. So who would defend him? So my point is, since Chizkiyahu destroyed the images of Asherah and the image of the serpent, Nehushtan, the name that he gave to it, and those were the idols worshipped by Israel. When Chizkiyahu destroyed them, the Assyrian thought that Chizkiyahu was against the Elohim of Israel because he destroyed it. But he had the idea from the point of view of paganism, pretty much, in which they believe that an idol is a god. So Chizkiyahu was actually helping Israel by destroying those idols. But like the last, who comes as a thief in the night, who will destroy the doctrine of Mary and Jesus, will be seen as an antichrist, for he is against the idols that people see as gods. Hope that's understood. So remember that the serpent was raised up in the desert so that people will look at it, believe in Yahweh, and they will be healed from the poison that serpents were putting in their bodies. The poison that serpents were putting in their bodies represents sin. And the only forgiveness of sins comes through us looking at Mashiach raised up on a tree, on a cross, to kill the serpent. Through his death, he killed the serpent, and we are forgiven of our sins. So the poison of the serpent within us has no power over us anymore. That was the point of the serpent in the desert. But then they started to worship it. When Chizkiyahu came, he said, "What are you guys doing? This is an idol," and he destroyed it. Just like nowadays, they made an idol of a man on a cross that people worship. But that was not the point of Mashiach dying on the cross. The point was not for them to make an image and bow down to it. It was for them to believe in what Yahweh was doing through that sacrifice. So the last comes and speaks against the idol, and people will see him as evil, for he's speaking against what people love and worship, which is a lie, falsehood. So I was saying all of that because Chizkiyahu connects with the last, and therefore he connects spiritually with Yonah and with Moshe and with Hanoch and with Yaakov. So the luminary orb and the stars carry on the entire year precisely such that they do not advance nor move back their positions, not even a single day, for all eternity, and they complete their years with correct precision in 364 days. In 3 years, the days are 1,092. The days are 1,092. In 5 years, they are 1,820. And in 8 years, 2,912 days. But for the moon alone, its days in 3 years amount to 1,062 days. So in 5 years, it lacks 50 days. So there we see it, how 10 days per year. It has in 5 years 1,770 days. Thus, the days of the moon in 8 years are 2,832 days. At 8 years, it is behind by 80 days. So if 8 years is behind by 80 days, that means 10 days per year. Should be clear. And it is what we see yearly when it comes to the solar calendar compared to the lunar calendar. The year becomes completed regularly according to the seasons. This is another very important verse when it comes to the calendar. Listen to this. The year becomes completed regularly according to the seasons. So the sun is the main luminary when it comes to counting the days. And when it comes to when to begin the year, has to do with the spring equinox. And the way to put in order every month during that year should be according to the seasons. As we know, during the spring equinox is when spring is beginning. So if we must do it according to the seasons, that would mean that the spring is the beginning of the year. I say that because those who have made a calendar following the stars start the year all the way during the half of spring. So they don't take into account the seasons, they only take into account the stars, and not even in a way that Hanoch tells us. And I'm talking about one calendar in particular that I know some of you guys know, or know the ministry that I'm speaking about, one that made a bunch of confusion when some of our, well, some of the people in the congregation saw it, and I guess they got very confused, and that brought a lot of confusion for many because I don't know, maybe they didn't see the videos that I made regarding the calendar, or they didn't understand what I was telling them. But like I have said, there are many issues with that calendar. And here we see that it says the year becomes completed regularly according to the seasons of the world. And Yahweh told us during spring in the first Exodus, he told us this will be the first month of the year. In fact, he gave a name to the month, which is Aviv. Aviv, one of the meanings of it is spring. So when does the year begin? During the first day of spring. And that is when the equinox happens. It begins the spring. So we should begin the year during the spring, according to Exodus, according to Hanoch. Yet those who started following only the stars take it all the way, like this year they started in May. So March, April, May. So like 2 months, because they started at the very beginning of May and the year starts at the end of March. So pretty much like a month and a half, almost 2 months of difference. And a month, I mean, and a season lasts 3 months. So to go 1 month and a half, that is to start the year during the middle of spring, or even at the end of it, if we would say that those would be 2 months. Oh, that's a good point also, Omar. Yeah, a lot of people are celebrating Rosh Hashanah today, which to them is Yom Teruah, because to them the year starts on the 7th month. So they say that the calendar that has to do with counting the years starts during Tishri, the 7th month. But the calendar, when it comes to the feasts, starts on Aviv, which is the 1st month. So it gets very confusing when you look at the way, because of the Jewish tradition, because of the Talmud, the way that they follow the calendar. But yeah, they are celebrating Rosh Hashanah tonight, but Rosh Hashanah means head of the year. The head of the year is the beginning of the year. So that is in Aviv, according to what Yahweh told Moshe in Exodus 12. Yet they, because of Babylon, when we were exiled in Babel, the calendar was changed, and the 1st month became the 7th, and the 7th the 1st. So that's why they celebrate Rosh Hashanah during the 1st day of the 7th month, which according to scripture is not called Rosh Hashanah, it's called Yom Teruah. So yeah, it says today some are celebrating Yom Teruah, yet our calendar Yom Teruah falls in the fall equinox. Exactly. The year becomes completed regularly according to the seasons of the world and the position of the luminary orb. So we are given here 2 keys to follow the calendar. 1, the year is fulfilled according to the seasons. We are told in Exodus, the 1st season of the year is spring. So the year begins with spring. That's it. And 2nd, the sun. because the sun is the one who gives us the time of the equinox, which is when we are told pretty much through the signs that spring is beginning. So the year becomes completed regularly according to the seasons of the world and the position of the luminary orb, which emerges through the gates from which it rises, and it sets for 30 days, which is the first month. So this verse kind of explains the whole calendar, or the way to start the calendar in a nutshell. This verse should be enough for a lot of people to understand that the calendar is not lunar, but solar, and to understand that it begins according to the seasons, not the stars. And while you may write questions, I'm gonna open Stellarium to see one thing, not I don't think it's that huge, but just to show it real quick. All right, so look, like, think of you being obviously on land, but being able to look at most of the firmament, meaning here where the mouse is, think it as being the north part and this other circle, the south one. So in the middle of the earth, in the equator, we're not able to see all these stars from north and south because they're very far away if we're right in the middle. They use that to say that it is because it is one part on top and one part bottom, meaning a globe. But think of it as being on flat surface with super eyesight and being able to see both the stars that are in the north and those that are in the south. Now I'm gonna get closer to the sun and look how, I'm gonna leave it right there. Look how it's right in the middle, right? It's right in the middle of the heavens. Look at those lines. It goes to the middle line, both. So it's right in the middle of the heavens, right in the middle of the earth. I mean, on top of the earth, but in the middle of the sky. That is the equinox. So that is why that's when the year begins. If I go 21, look how it passes the line. 22, 23, 24, 25 starts going down. If I go under it, obviously it'll start going up the line. So when it reaches the 20th of March, but remember, it is pretty much it could be from the 19th through the 21st, but mainly the 20th, which is right in the middle. You can see in this case how it's right in the middle of the sky. Let's go to June 21st, which is when the other season begins. Look how it's on one side of the sky. One side of the sky, that would be the north. We already kind of saw this last week, but I'm kind of showing a couple other things to understand it a little bit better. If we go to the other equinox, which is during September 21st, look how it goes right to the middle once again. And that's why in this case, it will be pretty much on the 23rd, 22, 23rd, as you can see right there. So we are barely starting September, right? So they are celebrating Rosh Hashanah or Yom Teruah on the 7th of September. So let me go to the 7th. Look at that. It is not in the middle. It needs more days to reach the middle, but something is happening. Look at the moon. Right there, the moon has 0.2% of light. So to them, it is the first day because they follow the moon. So when it starts shining some light, it is the first day of their month. That's why they have Rosh Hashanah here. But if you take it all the way to the 22nd, 23rd, you see right there how it passes. So a few hours earlier would take it right to the middle, pretty much there. I hope that's clear. But Yahweh told us that we were going to begin the year during the spring. And this is when fall begins. So the sun goes through the middle of the sky twice a year because it's when it's changing gates. Goes to the middle of the sky twice a year. But we begin the year. Oh, sorry. We begin the year with the spring, not with fall, as they do in Judaism. And then if we take it to the winter solstice, you see how it's in the south. So during the summer solstice is on the north part of the heavens. During the winter solstice is on the south part of the heavens. And during the equinoxes, it's right in the middle of the heavens. So that's why time begins there. 1 month later, the sun is there, going up, 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 then going back down, down, till it reaches the other half, down, and then it starts going up again to the middle. So I hope that is clear. And I guess let me continue with Hanok, unless you guys have any questions or anything that you want me to show you in Stellarium. Jay, do you want to see that date? Is that it? Year 23. I think you said 21st. So you see it's right in the middle. And I'm gonna make it closer. That'll be 7 a.m. And look how there's Saturn, the moon, the sun in the middle, then Mercury, then Jupiter, then Venus, then this one. And we could even continue with Mars right here. So they're kind of in line. The sun, not so much, is kind of upwards, but if we take the sun out, and just because it is the beginning of the year, we have Saturn, the moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Uranus, and Mars align. Remember how they aligned last year? Well, no, this year during Pesach, making a like the menorah. Hopefully you remember, you were watching that day, but it made well, in the same order that we have on top of the menorah, like we were seeing in the previous chapter of Hanok. I don't know if you want me to show anything else from that day. Also, look how so this is the middle. You see how from the 20 to 21st, it passes the middle of the heavens, and that's why that will be the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, etc. And eventually we might I guess we can do that if you guys want, but that would take a lot of time, and perhaps we wouldn't read anymore. But I have done, like, during the times in which it is possible for the two witnesses to die or begin and stuff like that. And I have seen some things that I find interesting, alignments. In the year, I think the 23 and the 24, there were some interesting alignments during the feasts that we will see eventually, perhaps when we reach there. Let's see. All right. Uh, um, so let's say if everything began this year, then that would be 22, like 2022 would make 1 year of the ministry of the two witnesses. 2023, 2024, and then half of 2024. So meaning around September of 2024 is when they would die, if everything began this year. If, let's say, everything begins next year, then it will be 2025 around September. And let me look at a calendar of 2024. So March 24 would be, we will begin on a, yeah, 20th, and if it were March 25, that will make it on 26th. So there will be an adjustment between those 2 years, the 24th and the 25th, if I'm not mistaken. So year 24, we will go to September. Which would begin on, well, September 18 would be Yom Teruah. So this would be Yom Teruah, the 18th of September of 2024. And if that was the day, then that would be the time when the two witnesses would be in prison. So Mars is in Gemini, as in the two brothers, the two witnesses going through war, spiritual warfare or testing. Then the bull, which is the last, the ox that will be killed on Yom Kippur, which is 10 days later, we'll see that in a moment, has Jupiter in between its horns, which are like his crown. Therefore, also Jupiter in Hebrew is Tzedakah, which represents the Yahweh Tzidkenu, our righteousness. So it would be like the two witnesses going through war for the last, who is Tzedek, righteous, justice, to become the sacrifice of Yom Kippur in order to enter the heavens. And I say that because Uranus represents the heavens. Wonder why they gave that name to it. Then Saturn would be, let me try and move it. Well, Saturn would be right in the water of Aquarius. So that represents time for the, we could say time for the new flood, when the man Almighty will spill a flood, but this time of fire over this earth. As we know, the days of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah. So Saturn represents time, and it will be time for water or plagues or the last. In fact, we could see this as a bowl of wrath, as a bowl in the water as blood. Like we see the bowls of wrath are bowls filled with blood. So it will be time for the bowls of wrath. And not only that, look how during that day there will be stars falling from Aquarius, the southern, well, these stars right here. So there will be stars falling on that day in Aquarius next to Saturn. So, okay. It's not moving like I'm hoping. And let me see what else. Also, interestingly, Mercury, which represents Azazel, and the merchants who have sold the doctrine, meaning, well, creating the apostasy to make money and all of that, would be under the foot of the lion of Yahudah. So once the two witnesses finish their testimony, that means Azazel, the false Messiah, the false, the false Messiah, we could even say false prophet also, will have been defeated by the lion of Yahudah. So that will be that day. That will be day 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the 27th of September of 2024 would be Yom Kippur, which could be when the two witnesses die, if everything began this year. I want to make that clear, those if and all that. So we have Yom Kippur. See where the other planets are. Well, just here we see the sun and Mercury. I don't know if you guys remember when Paul and Barnaby were confused by the people who thought they were Jupiter and Mercury. So they thought Barnaby was Jupiter and Paul was Mercury because he was the one speaking. And Mercury represents the messenger of the Elohim. But as we know, when it comes to the two witnesses, they are like Moshe and Aharon. Moshe was the representative of Elohim on this earth, and Aharon was his prophet. So in a way, when we see the sun and Mercury in a positive sense, that would represent the son of righteousness, the witness like Moshe, and his messenger, Eliyahu, like Aharon. So the sun and the moon, like the two witnesses on Yom Kippur, will be one with the congregation represented by Virgo once they die for the congregation. And not only the congregation will be represented by Virgo, also Venus connects, like I repeat, in the positive sense, it's seen as feminine. From those stars is the only one. Just like the moon is seen as feminine, the sun is masculine. Venus is seen as feminine, and therefore it would connect with the congregation, which is right at the feet of Virgo, who represents also the congregation. Look how Mars still in Gemini. So in fact, it is right in the middle. Like it moved closer to the center during those 10 days because we were on the 18th and it was entering Gemini. But on the 27th, which would be Yom Kippur, we have it right in the middle. So the two witnesses in the middle of war when they are killed. And that will be their main test, of course, to have to go through that. Jupiter still in the middle of the horns of the bull. which is the bull that is sacrificed on Yom Kippur to become king of righteousness. Saturn still under the water of Aquarius, but look how there's no stars falling anymore. My point is that the falling stars of Yom Teruah would be mainly for that time period in which they are caught. But look how here there are 4 other events of stars falling, 4 different places from the heavens where stars will be falling. And all of that is also interesting because, as we know, once the 2 witnesses die, once they resurrect, they will go to the heavens, and Michael, which is one of the 2 witnesses, will take Satan out of heaven. So he will fall with 1/3 of the angels. So look how there are so many falling stars during this time period. It is as if Yahweh, because this normally happens during this time. So it would be as if Yahweh was telling us that Satan would fall with his angels, the stars, 1/3 of the stars of heaven, during the time of the 7th month, which in the Gregorian calendar is September. So let's say they are killed there, then the 30th would be 3 days after they are killed. 4, 5, that would be Sukkot, which is when the false Messiah could manifest. So look at those 4 spots where there will be stars falling. Also look at the moon, how we got closer to the sun and Mercury in Virgo. For instance, just like the chosen few will be going to the mountains to get together with the 2 witnesses as the congregation. Venus is getting closer to Libra, which, now that I see this, connecting it with what I mentioned regarding Yom Kippur, when we had Mercury and the sun in Virgo and then Venus at the bottom, and I mentioned it just like the feminine, so it could be the congregation. It could also be seen as the many, for Venus has also negative connotations and it's feminine, so it could be seen as the congregation of the many, while Virgo, the congregation of the few, the virgin. So during Sukkot, which is 7 days, we're about to see those 7 days go through. The moon in Virgo, like the chosen few, go into the sun and Mercury like the 2 witnesses, while Venus is about to be judged. So we could be seeing like the great whore about to go through judgment during the 7 bowls of wrath. Or if we talk about the many, they will go through judgment, meaning they will have to die and then be resurrected, justified because of the faith in their hearts, unlike the few who do not have to die. So let's say this is the first day of Sukkot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then Shemini Atzeret, which would be the 8th, when it is possible for the harvest to happen. Look how Venus is right in the middle now of Libra, like representing the judgment of the great whore, and therefore the great tribulation for the many. So we could say Venus as the apostasy on one side, the many who follow the Almighty and have faith in Mashiach, and on the other side, the ones who claim to have faith in Mashiach yet do not fulfill his commandments. So the many split in 2. While, look at this, I mentioned how this day could be the day of the harvest, and the sun is right in the hand of Virgo with Spica, which is pretty much taking the wheat of the harvest. Virgo taking the wheat in the hand, and that is the son of righteousness in the hand. We know the son of righteousness, the last is the hand of Yahweh, taking the wheat, who are the chosen few, with the help of his messenger, represented by Mercury. Let's see if there's anything else interesting here. Saturn still there because that's what Saturn does. He takes forever. But in fact, look how it has been there since Yom Teruah, right? And we said Yom Teruah was was it the 18th? Yeah, I think it was the 18th, Yom Teruah. Look how Saturn is barely entering the water. So let's go 1 month prior. Where did it go? Just a second. All right, there you go. You see how it's far away from the water? So even though we just saw like 20 days, and Saturn remained in the water the whole time during those 20 days, the first 20 days of the 7th month. But we take it 1 month earlier and it's far away from the water. It's outside of the water of Aquarius, right? That's what I mean. So my point is that when we get closer to the 7th month is when Aquarius has Saturn entering the stream of water, which would represent the second flood coming, the bowls of wrath, etc. So by Yom Teruah is entering the water on the 27th, which would be Yom Kippur. It's right there. Then 27, I said Yom Kippur, right? So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Then 15, that will be Sukkot. But then we have, that will be the first day of Sukkot. So the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, the 7th, and the 8th. So for the harvest, is right in the middle of the water and is moving very slow. Then I'll continue from Shemini Atzeret to see what happens. There's the moon going through. You see how it's getting right in the middle of the water, which I repeat would represent the bowls of wrath, the time for the bowls of wrath, the time for what we could say is the second flood, but of fire that would fall on this earth right after Shemini Atzeret. And then I'm going to switch by month. Let's go to the 11th month, 5, and you see how, so it lasts there about 2 to 3 months inside the water, and then it comes out real quick. And you see how it starts going far away and far away and far away. So it is as if it went to the water during that time to represent that. And look how I'm moving and moving and moving, and Saturn is not going back, but it's slow somewhere else. I hope that's clear. Just the fact that Saturn will get in the stream of water of Aquarius by the time in which it is possible for the 2 witnesses to be killed and the chosen few to be harvested. So that was on the 24th, but let's say everything starts next year, and therefore 3.5 years later, it will be September of the 25th. And it will be on the 25th or the 24th. I would have to go and check, but that would take a while. So I'm going to leave the 24th as Yom Teruah. Saturn is in the tail of what could be a whale. So the sun shining on Virgo, Mercury in the hand, the moon close to the wheat in her hand, and Mars also really close. Jupiter in Gemini. So in a way, the other one kind of seemed more like it. If we look at the way the stars were um, within the respective constellations. In this one, there are several planets, counting the sun and the moon, in Virgo, which could be important. But I think the other one, which had Mars in Gemini and the other things that we just saw, kind of fit a little bit more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this would be Yom Kippur. So yeah, between the year 24 and the year 25, according to what we see in the heavens of the stars and the planets, I think the 24 fits a little bit more. And I also had another ones. Like, if you guys let me know, like send me an email or something, I will check them before time so I can just go to the days and show you right away. Of other important days other than the ones I showed you, I had some other alignments that were going to happen throughout the 3.5 years. But I would have to go through the several feasts, which would take some time as to do it right here live. Um, so that was Yom Kippur, I think. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, the other ones seem to have more. This one, like I said, there are a lot of planets in Virgo. Virgo represents the congregation, and everybody gathering in Virgo could be connected to how the two witnesses, when they die, bring the congregation together and harvest it, which is also represented by the hand of Virgo and what it has in what she has in her hand. But I think the other one was a little bit more meaningful, having Mars in Gemini, Venus in Libra, Mercury in the Sun in Virgo with the Moon during the harvest in the hand, and Saturn in Aquarius. So how Virgo was looking, Jupiter in the Bull, Mars in Gemini, all of that I think was clear. So, well, that would bring the time closer. So that would mean if that happens, that would be this year that everything began. So that would mean that in about 15 days, we must keep our eyes open for the third uh, world war, which could happen anytime once autumn begins. In fact, since the Jewish people believe that autumn began right now, in a way we could keep our eyes open from now on, because they fulfill whatever they do in their calendar. And that's why they later say, you see, however this happened in our calendar, in our time, it is because they have the power to make it happen. So sometimes they do it with their calendar. So we must pay attention. And well, let me see if there are any other dates if you want me to check. So chapter 74, verse 1. The leaders of the chiefs of the thousands who are assigned over all creation and over all the stars have to make with the 4 intercalated days, meaning the 4 days that are added for the changing of seasons, because 360 days, because of the 360 degrees that the sun has to cover over our heads in the sky. But 4 days of the 364, it doesn't move any degrees. So the leaders of the chiefs of the thousands who are assigned over all creation and over all the stars have to make with the 4 intercalated days, and being never separated from their office according to their calculation of the year. So they are pretty much 4 malachim connected or representing the 4 malachim who are at the 4 corners of the earth, also represented by the 4 cherubim who are around the throne of Yahweh. each of those connected to each of the days to change the seasons. So that's why each of the seasons are connected to one of the letters of the name Yahweh, one of the levels of interpretation of scriptures, one of the levels of creation, which are emanation, creation, formation, and action. 4 corners of the earth, north, south, east, and west. The 4 creatures, lion, ox, man, and eagle. So those 4 creatures, like I always mention, the lion represents the east, the ox, the west. First and last, lion and ox. Then north and south are the eagle and the son of man. So when we see in scriptures that the first creature that announces the first seal does it during, well, since it is the lion, as we see in Revelation 6, the lion is the one who announces the first seal when it is open. And that confirms what the other parts of scriptures tells us, that the 2 witnesses begin their ministry during spring, because spring is the season connected to the lion. That's why Mashiach, the Lion of Yehudah, died in spring, but he came as a lamb. That's why he died on the month of the lamb. So the month of the lamb, interestingly enough, is connected with Yehudah, who happens to be the lion. So Yehudah, who happens to be the lion, connected with the first month of the year as the head of all the months, just like Yehudah as the head of the congregation, the head of the tribes. Yahushua came as the lion to die as the lamb, or came from Yehudah, the lion, to die as the lamb. There are different ways in which we can explain that, the fact that he is lion and lamb. We could separate it in 2 manifestations, first as the lamb, second as the lion. But even in the first coming as the lamb, he is connected with the lion because he came genetically from David, from Yehudah. So the first season, and I guess, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it. No. It'll be too small anyways. But so the first season, spring, is connected with the first creature of the 4. Then in the second seal, we see that it is the ox, the one who announces the opening of the second seal. And the ox is connected to the other side, the west, and it is connected to the season of fall, autumn. And as we know, between spring and autumn, there is summer. So that would mean that from the first seal to the second seal, there are 6 months. That's why I have said that when the 7 years begin and the 2 witnesses have started, around 6 months after their beginning of ministry is when the second seal would be open, because it kind of skips 1 season according to the creatures that announce the seals. So then comes, and well, by the way, the 7th month, which is when autumn or fall begins, is the month connected with Yahusef or Yosef, the tribe of Yosef, which is the tribe genetically, hence the last comes. In the second year of the last 7, the 3rd seal would be opened during summer, because it is the Son of Man who announces it. Well, not the Son of Man, well, I'm sure on earth, yeah, but I mean the face of a man, the creature who has the face of a man, who announces it and who represents the south, connected with the tribe of Reuben. And then 6 months later would be the 4th seal during winter, which is connected with the tribe of Dan, which is the eagle, the north. So that would mean that the first 2 years would be for the first 4 seals. And I would even say that the fifth seal would be fulfilled at the very end of that second year. So in 2 years, the first 2 years of the last 7 is when the first 5 seals would be open. I have also explained how the 6th seal happens to be the beginning of the millennium, the beginning of the 1,000 years. That's why is like what we read during that seal is a lot, and not a lot of words. I mean, a lot of happenings, a lot of events on the earth that will scare a lot of people. It is possible that that is when the north and the south will switch, which spiritually could mean a lot of things, but I'm not going to get into that. We're not in the book of Revelation. It's already recorded. So during the 6th seal, it says that the day of Yahweh has come. The day of Yahweh is the Shabbat. The Shabbat is represented or represents the millennium, the 1,000 years at the end. So that would mean that during the 6th seal, the 7th millennium starts, meaning the year 6,000. So that would mean that the seals begin during the year 98, because it will be 2 years before the year 6,000. And I say that so that you guys understand why I mentioned sometimes that it would be 2 years before the millennium. And if Yahweh has shortened the times, like I was saying earlier, regarding because of the leap year and all of that, it will be pretty much 1 year per 1,000 years. So that's why it is possible for the last 7 years to have started this year. Because, for instance, if Mashiach was killed in the year 30th, as most believe, 2030 would be 2,000 years, but 2,000 years of 365 days. Hanoch tells us that we should count years of 364. So if we make the calculations, taking one of each of those days from each of those years, that would be 2,000 years pretty much. Well, a little bit less. Plus the day extra of every year that they made it a leap year. That would get us closer to the year 6,000, and therefore the possibility for everything to begin is there. And the way everything is happening so fast in the earth, one could definitely believe that we are already in the beginning of the 7 years. The only thing missing is, well, not missing, but I mean, for most people, I believe, seeing the 2 witnesses speaking openly or being a bit known by the world. But Yahweh is the one in charge of that. And like I have said, also, people will see and not understand, because he comes as a thief in the night. So, when a thief enters a house, everybody's asleep. So nobody sees him, even though he may go by them. So that is pretty much also how the 2 witnesses will happen. Yet a lot of people are expecting things that may not happen regarding the 2 witnesses, because they're not written, but Hollywood has made a lot of movies. Well, not Hollywood, but Christian Hollywood has made a lot of movies regarding the rapture and all of that have given different ideas of what the 2 witnesses would be. So going back to the chapter, the leaders of the chiefs of the thousands who are assigned over all creation and over all the stars have to make with the 4 intercalated days, and being never separated from their office according to the calculation of the year. These must serve 4 days that are not computed in the calculation of the year. I repeat, these must serve 4 days that are not computed or counted, in the sense that the sun does not change any degrees, because the degrees of a circle are 360. So 360 days, 1 day per degree. Yet there are 4 days that are not counted because the sun doesn't move any degrees because it is changing seasons. Respecting them, and also, this is important, this verse, this must serve 4 days that are not computed. This verse could be or is the answer for the question, why do we find in Daniel years of 360? Because we see that the 2 witnesses speak for 1,260 days. That is years of 360. And we see it several times in Revelation and in the book of Daniel. Why does it mention 360-day years? Because the 4 years of changing of seasons are not always mentioned in the calculation of the whole year. So respecting them, men do err, for these luminaries render service precisely to the seasons of the world. So those 4 angels that have to do with those 4 days that are not mentioned always when it comes to the year, when they say 360, those 4 angels have to do with the 4 seasons, like I have mentioned already, each of those with spring, summer, fall, and winter. So it says, respecting them, men do err, for these luminaries render service precisely to the seasons of the world. 1 through the first gate. 1 through the first gate. That would be when it enters the winter. It does it through the first gate. Then it says another through the third. That is when it enters spring. During that day, it's in the third, but the next day is in the fourth gate, and that is when the beginning of the first month of the year starts. As we read earlier in Hanoch, not earlier today, but in previous chapters, that the sun is in the fourth gate during the beginning of the year. And right before that is in the third gate. The 12th month has 31 days because the 31st is the day in which the season changes from winter to spring. So that is the day mentioned here. So 1 through the first gate, another through the third, another through the fourth, which is when it enters fall, and another through the sixth gate, which is when it enters summer. Another way of seeing it, because, well, you guys, I know, well, some of you guys may have this, the sign of the calendar in which I added the gates here. So another way of putting it, because I was mentioning the gates, like I just said, as the last day of the month in which it changes seasons. But if we see as the first day of the month in which the season began officially, then when it says respecting men do err, for these luminaries render service precisely to the seasons of the world, 1 through the first gate, 1 through the first gate, which would be entering winter. Another through the third, which would be entering fall, autumn. Another through the fourth, which would be entering spring, and another through the sixth, which would be entering summer. And then it says, and the shalom of the world gets completed. The shalom, this is, I guess, important to understand the word shalom, because shalom means completeness. It's also connected, the root of shalom, shalom, is connected to paying your debts. So when you pay, you have shalom because you don't owe anybody anything. When you pay, you have completed your payments. So, and the shalom of the world gets completed in 364 seasons. So the completeness of the year reaches when we get to 364 seasons. The shalom of the world gets completed in 364 fourth seasons. Now, let me see something. If we were talking here about 260, oh, well, it says it's like, and the shalom of the world gets completed in the 364th seasons. So that could be referring to 24-hour as a season, as a time frame, which could be translated here as season. You guys let me know if in your translations this last word is seasons or if they write another word. Because another way of seeing it could be there are 4 seasons each year. So 364 seasons, which would be 91 years. 91 years is also similar to the 91 days that each season lasts, 30, 30, 31. So 91 days for a season. But if it is speaking about actual seasons, 364 seasons to complete shalom in the world, that would be 91 days. I mean, 91 years. It says here, and the harmony of the world becomes complete. Okay, this is nice. The harmony of the world becomes complete every 364th state of it. So yeah, it would refer to 364 days of the year. For the signs, the seasons, the years, and it continues. Maybe Priscilla, the 5th verse is actually added to the 4th, and that's why they don't add the 5th, because in this case, you see how small it is. Kind of doesn't make sense for this to be a whole verse, for this to be a whole verse. But anyways. And the shalom of the world gets completed in 364th, as it said that their state of it. For the signs, the seasons, the years. So since it mentions signs, seasons, and years, then it would mean that this word season is not the meaning this type of season. So this season would refer to the time frame of 24 hours each day, which make 364 for the shalom of the world to be completed. And throughout those 364 days, the malachim and the stars were given for signs, seasons, and years. And the days, Uriel showed me the watcher to whom the sovereign of worth appointed over all the luminaries. And the days. Oh, I'm sorry. That was connected to the other one. For the signs, the seasons, the years, and the days. Uriel showed me the watcher to whom the sovereign of worth appointed over all the luminaries of the sky and in the world, so that they might rule the face of the sky, be seen from the earth, and to be the guides of the days and of the nights. The luminary orb, the moon, the stars, and all the auxiliary creations that circuit their orbits in the vehicle of the sky. The vehicle of the sky. So they are in the sky, in the firmament, and the firmament moves with the stars stuck to it. Because they, like, one gets in a vehicle, sits, and then the vehicle moves. So the sky is the vehicle through which the stars move. That's why the constellations are the same and they all move together. If the world was a sphere going like around the sun and the whole galaxy moving away from other galaxies, and all galaxies also moving in their own path, why is it that all constellations are the same from 6,000 years ago? They would have changed a long time ago. But there is a lot of proof that the constellations are exactly the same. So creations that circuit the orbits, so they have orbits in the vehicle of the sky, because when we talk about the sun and the moon and the planets, they also have different orbits than the rest of the stars, which are stuck in the sky as their vehicle. In the same way, Uriel showed me 12 gates open for the circuit of the vehicles of the luminary orb in the heavens. Through them shoot forth the rays of the sun. And the heat expands upon the earth when they are open in their assigned seasons. So depending on how many of these gates are open, how hot or cold it is in the earth. So depending on the season, how many of these gates are open for the heat to reach us. So in the same way, Uriel showed me 12 gates open for the circuit of the vehicles of the luminary orb in the heavens. We can also talk about how each of the constellations is where, well, the sun goes through each of the constellations throughout the 12 months. And it therefore remains 30 days on each constellation, meaning 1 month on each constellation. And depending on the constellation in which it is, the time of the year in which we are. So that would mean that according to the constellation in which the sun is, the season in which we find ourselves. My point is the connection between these gates. Remember that the constellations are called houses. A house has a gate. So when the sun enters a constellation, enters through the gate of the constellation. Therefore, there are 12 gates on each of the 12 constellations, which are houses. And each season happens while the sun is in 3 of those constellations. So in the same way, Uriel showed me 12 gates open for the circuit of the vehicles of the luminary orb in the heavens. Through them shoot forth the rays of the luminary orb. And the heat expands upon the earth when they are open in their assigned seasons. They also are useful for the winds and the spirit of the dew when they are open in the extremities of the skies. 12 are the gates I saw in heaven at the ends of the earth. So in this case, we will be speaking about 12 gates around the dome, which are the ends of the earth. 12 are the gates I saw in heaven at the ends of the earth, through which emerged the luminary orb, the moon, the stars, and all the works of heaven at their rising and setting. And many windows are also open to the right and to their left. And each window spreads heat during its season. These also are those gates from which the stars go forth, and in which they set according to their number, according to what he has commanded. I have seen in the skies vehicles that circuit the world above those gates, and in them turn the stars that never set, because they continue going around and around over us. They never set, and in them turn the stars that never set. One of these is greater than all, which goes around the entire world. One of these is greater than all, which goes around the entire world. Mine says 264 positions of the world, so days. All right, thank you. And yeah, they have maintained the same in the Great Pyramid, still a celestial timepiece for thousands of years ago. That's right. And you know, the 3 pyramids that align with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, therefore that shows that it was the same constellation back when the pyramids were made. Chapter 75, verse 1. And at the extremities of the earth, I saw 12 gates open for all the regions, from which the winds go forth, and from them they blow over the earth. So just like 6 gates for the sun to rise and set, so that will mean, 6, we have another 6 here. We could say that it's 12, unless, we already know that there are 6 gates through which the sun and the moon go. But if we see them as 6 where it rises and 6 where it sets, then that would mean 12, and it could be connected to the 12 that we just saw in the previous chapter. However, just want to make clear, Hanok tells us of 6 gates for the sun and the moon. Then it mentioned 12 for the stars and everything else to go through. And now it's mentioning 12 for the wind. So we could say 6 gates for the sun and the moon, 12 gates for the wind. So, and at the extremities of the earth, I saw 12 gates open for all the regions from which the winds go forth, and from them they blow over the earth. 3 of them are open over the face of the sky. 3 in the west, 3 on the right side, which would mean the south, 3 on the right side of heaven, and 3 on the left, which is the north. The first 3 are those that are towards the east. The first 3 are those that are towards the east. We see there how the east represents the beginning. That's why Mashiach came from the east as the light of the world, which comes from the east. So the first 3 are those that are towards the east. The next 3 are towards the south. These was also, we see in Numbers, how the congregation was camping around the Mishkan, which was where the presence of Yahweh was. So the Mishkan would represent the sun, and the 12 tribes would be placed 3 tribes on the east, 3 on the south, 3 on the west, 3 on the north, representing each of the 4 seasons. 3 months for each season, 3 tribes on each side. And when they were to move, when the cloud would go up and start moving, the camp would move first, those on the east, then those on the south, just like the order that is given here. So the movement of Israel through the desert for 40 years was representing the movement of the stars, the sun and the moon and the stars through the sky. Yahweh said that the children of Yitzhak and Abraham would be like the stars of heaven. So they became that pretty much when they were chosen and given the Torah, the heavenly law. So they began to act like the stars in the desert representing the sky. That's why they would move just like we see the calendar. So the first 3 are those that are towards the east. Those would be representing the tribes Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zebulun. The next 3 are towards the south, which are represented by Reuben, Shimon, and Gad. The next 3 are towards the north, which are Yahusef, Menashe, and Benjamin. They said the north. In that case would be Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. So in the north, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. And then the next 3 are towards the west. And those would be Yahusef, Menashe, and Benjamin. Benjamin is the last son of Jacob. Look how it mentions the west, which begins with Yahusef and ends with Benjamin. So it represents the end. So the west represents the end. That's why west represents the back, where the end is of the body, and where the sun sets, so the end of the day. Also, when Yahweh will complete his plan, because he will make his name known from the east to the west. So Mashiach came from the east to teach the name, and he would do so again, as he said it in John 17, coming from the west, like Yahweh promised that first and last would come from east and west. That's why the lion and the ox. I hope that's clear. So look how it starts with the east and ends with the west to represent first and last, the very beginning, the very end. So I hope that was clear regarding the tribes and how they connect with this. So then it says, through 4 of them proceed winds that are for the curing of the earth and for its living. And through 8 proceed the jeopardizing winds. Let me see. Somebody else. front and back. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And remember how in Exodus 33, when Moshe asks Yahweh to show him his way and then to show him his kabod, his honor. When he shows him his kabod, he shows him his back, showing that the kabod comes from the west, like the back of Yahweh. Yeah, that's right, west side. So second. So through four of them come winds of blessing and peace, and from other eight come winds of punishment. When they are sent, they bring devastation to the whole earth. So through four of them come winds of blessing and peace. Four, like the four letters of the name Yahweh, who gives us blessing and peace. And from other eight come winds of punishment. Eight represents a new beginning. Punishment pretty much brings a new beginning, either for good or for bad, depending on how the person takes the punishment. When they are sent, they bring devastation to the whole earth and to the water which is on it, and to all those who dwell upon it, and to everything that is in the water and on dry ground. And the first wind from those gates, called the east wind, comes out through the first gate. So we see the first wind, the east wind, through the first gate. So the first connected to the east. And obviously also to the spirit, because wind is spirit, ruach in Hebrew. So the first ruach, meaning the ruach HaKodesh, the ruach of Yahweh, came from the east, from the first gate, meaning Yahushua, the first, who happens to be the gate, which is towards the east. The one that comes from the south brings devastation, drought, heat, and destruction. The one that comes from the south brings devastation, drought, heat, and destruction. And just here is talking about pretty much the physical, how things happen in this creation. But when it comes to the spiritual in scriptures, we read how since the sun comes from the east, the wind of the east brings heat, even drought, and the south represents blessing. So they kind of switch in a way. But remember that from four gates we get blessing, from eight punishment, and those 8 plus 4 make the 12 gates. I mean, yeah, the 12 gates of the winds. So the one that comes from the south brings devastation, drought, heat, and destruction. Then it says, and through the second gate in the middle comes what is right. Through the second gate in the middle comes what is right. And from it come rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. And through the third gate, which is towards the north, comes cold and drought. So from the north comes cold and drought. Well, you see how it was mentioned in the south, and then it began through the second gate. It mentions comes what is right, and from it come rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. But then he mentions the third gate, which is towards the north, and from it comes cold and drought. And after these, the winds towards the south come out through 3 gates. First, through the first of the gates, which inclines towards the east, comes a hot wind. Here we go, what I was just mentioning. The hot wind from the east, but it's one of the 3 gates connected to the south, because obviously you know how you can say northeast when you're going diagonal between the north and the east, right? So pretty much the way here with the three gates. After these, the winds towards the south come out through three gates. First, through the first of the gates, which inclines towards the east. So of the three gates in the south, there is one closer to the east. So southeast. And from it comes hot wind. And through the middle gate, which is next to it, come pleasant fragrances and dew and rain and prosperity and life. So we see here what I was mentioning regarding the south. And he says the middle gate. So we would mean the one that is mostly in the middle or in the south, in the south, since the other two would be inclined to the east and to the west. So, and through the middle gate, which is next to it, come pleasant fragrances and dew and rain and prosperity and life. Dew and rain represent blessing, so that's why south connected to blessing. And through the third gate, which is towards the west, come dew and rain and locusts and devastation. So also dew and rain connected to the south to blessing, but since it is inclined to the west, where the end happens, the end of times, where the plagues have to happen, that is why the south gate, which is inclined to the west, also brings locusts and devastation. I hope that is understood. And after these, the winds towards the north from the seventh gate, which is towards the east, come dew and rain, locusts and devastation. So very similar to the one we just read about. Then it says, and through the gate exactly in the middle come rain and dew and life and prosperity. And through the third gate, which is towards the west, comes mist and hoarfrost and snow and rain and dew and locust. And after this, the winds towards the west through the first gate, which inclines towards the north. And after this, the winds towards the west through the first gate, which inclines towards the north, come dew and rain and hoarfrost and cold and snow and frost. And from the middle gate come dew and rain, prosperity and blessing. And through the last gate, which is towards the south, come drought and devastation, burning and destruction. So the last gate of the west, which would represent the last of the last, the end of the end. It says, which is towards the south, which connects with the Son of Man, who comes at the end as the last. So, and through the last gate, which is towards the south, come drought, as the drought of the third seal, in which people will be hungry for the water of life, for the word of Yahweh. Devastation, like that will happen during the plagues, of course. Burning, like the one we see during the bowls of wrath, and the fire, the consuming fire, and the destruction, obviously, at the end of everything. Also, does the 12 gates, and thus the 12 gates of the four quarters of heaven are complete. So imagine the heavens as a circle, and it would be three here, well, three here, three here, three here, three here. And that's why one in the middle, which would be right where the north, south, east, and west are, and then one window, one gate to each side, which would be north, west, or northeast, or southeast, or southwest. So, and thus the 12 gates of the four quarters of heaven are complete. And all their laws and all their punishments and all their benefits have been shown to you, my son Methuselah. We just saw how these gates are connected with the tribes and how they were situated around the Mishkan during Exodus. And now we see that Hanoch was talking to Methuselah who was the man who lived the most in this reality. And Methuselah means when he dies, I will send it. That's why Methuselah was a sign of the flood. When he died, Yahweh would send the flood. But given mercy, he gave 7 days extra for them to mourn him. So those 7 days are connected also with the 7 days of the adjustment that we do for the calendar as an extra time that we must add, but also connect with the end of days in which the 7 years of Daniel, the last week of Daniel, will happen for the flood of fire to come down. So, and thus the 12 gates of the 4 quarters of heaven are complete, and all their laws and all their punishments and all their benefits I have shown to you, my son Methuselah. So that's how that chapter ends.